Emily had been looking forward to Friday night all week, imagining a quiet evening with her husband, Mark, and their 12-year-old son, Jake, the kind of night that felt ordinary but comforting, a break from the stress of work and the endless routines that filled their days. She had prepared the living room carefully, fluffed the pillows, and made popcorn that smelled warm and buttery, hoping for laughter and small talk, the kind that made a family feel like a safe, unshakable unit. Mark had smiled as he picked out a classic romantic movie, teasing Jake about how he would probably cry at the sad parts, even though he insisted he wouldn't, and Emily had laughed along, enjoying the small, precious sounds of her family together. But as the opening credits rolled, Emily felt a small, strange tug in her chest, a whisper of unease she couldn't explain. Mark's phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the comfortable rhythm of the room, and he glanced at it quickly, a fleeting smile touching his lips before he set it down again, almost too quickly, as if hiding something. Emily told herself it was nothing, just work messages, a routine check-in, but she noticed the subtle way his eyes flicked to the screen once more during the first scene, the way he seemed slightly tense, and a shiver of suspicion ran through her. She tried to shake it off, focusing instead on Jake's giggles at a funny scene, the warmth of the popcorn in her hands, the cozy glow of the lamp casting soft shadows on the walls, and yet the unease persisted, hovering like a shadow at the edge of her happiness. She thought about how life had been lately, the routines, the small arguments about chores, the late nights at work, the way Mark sometimes seemed distracted, but she had ignored them, telling herself everything was fine, normal, even perfect in its ordinary way. Tonight, though, something felt different, as if a small crack had appeared in the solid foundation she had built around her trust and her heart. Emily tried to laugh with Jake when he mimicked a character from the movie, but her mind kept drifting back to that flicker of tension in Mark's eyes, the unexplained quick glance at the phone, the sudden pause in his smile. She caught herself wondering if she was imagining it, if her instincts were overreacting to nothing, yet she could not deny the tiny spike of worry twisting inside her. The movie played on, scenes of romance, joy, and drama unfolding on the screen, and Emily felt the contrast between the happy fiction before her and the gnawing uncertainty in real life, a strange tension that made her chest ache slightly, a mix of love, comfort, and sudden fear she didn't fully understand. She reminded herself that they were a family, a small team, and nothing could shake the bond they shared, that this was just a normal Friday night, just popcorn, laughter, and a movie, and yet her mind would not be reassured. Mark laughed again at a joke, reaching over to ruffle Jake's hair, and Emily smiled, trying to ground herself in the warmth of the moment, telling herself it was enough, that these tiny doubts were probably nothing, just fleeting thoughts. But she couldn't stop noticing the subtle tension in his posture, the brief distraction in his gaze, the way he seemed slightly preoccupied, even as he laughed and joked. She sipped her drink, listening to the soft background music of the film, the rustle of popcorn, Jake's occasional comments, and yet the feeling lingered, a quiet, persistent unease that made her heart beat faster, a whisper of warning she couldn't ignore even as she tried to focus on the simple pleasure of being together. The night continued, moments of laughter and warmth punctuated by Emily's silent observation, the flickering lamplight illuminating faces she loved, yet highlighting small signs she had never noticed before, the twitch of an eyebrow, the pause in speech, the subtle distraction that made her wonder if everything was really as ordinary and safe as it seemed. She reminded herself again that she loved Mark, that she trusted him, that their life was good, stable, and filled with the kind of small joys that made the hard days worthwhile, and yet the uneasy feeling remained, a quiet shadow over the soft light of the living room, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, not everything was as simple as it seemed. Emily tried to push it aside, focusing on Jake's laughter, the buttery smell of popcorn, the romance unfolding on the screen, telling herself this was just a normal night, yet deep down, she could feel a shift, a small tremor of doubt that stirred her heart in ways she had never felt before, a gentle premonition of change that she could not yet name but would soon understand in ways that would shake the quiet rhythm of their lives. The movie played, the laughter continued, the room glowed warmly, and Emily sat there, caught between comfort and fear, between the familiar love she cherished and the subtle hint of a secret waiting to emerge, a quiet tension that promised that by the end of the night, nothing would feel the same again. The next morning, Emily couldn't shake the feeling from the night before, the quiet unease that had settled in her chest and refused to leave. And as she made breakfast, she found herself stealing glances at Mark, noticing the way he moved through the kitchen, the small tension in his shoulders, the distracted way he stirred his coffee. And though he smiled at her and Jake, there was a faint edge she had never seen before, something subtle that made her heart race and her mind spin with questions she didn't want to admit out loud. Jake, bright-eyed and full of energy, bounded into the kitchen carrying his school backpack, chattering about a new game he wanted to play with his friends after school. But his voice carried a note of seriousness that made Emily pause, and then, without warning, he asked, "Mom, why does Dad's friend Lisa text him so much?" The question hit Emily like a cold wave, sudden and sharp, and she froze, trying to measure her reaction, unsure if she should laugh it off, reassure Jake, or confront the gnawing worry that tightened in her chest. She forced a small smile, saying, "Maybe she's just a friend, sweetie." But the words sounded hollow even to her, and she could feel her stomach twist with a mix of fear and disbelief. Jake looked at her with the seriousness of a child who had noticed something adults were hiding, and Emily realized that he had observed more than she had realized, that children often see truths we try to hide from ourselves, and a cold knot of dread formed in her chest as she thought about the countless small moments that suddenly might have had a different meaning. She watched Mark reach for his phone, frown slightly at the screen, and put it down without explanation, and her heart began to race faster, each beat echoing the unspoken questions piling up inside her. As the day went on, Emily tried to focus on work and daily routines, but every time Mark glanced at his phone, every time Jake mentioned something about school or friends, her mind wandered back to the brief, troubling moment at breakfast, spinning stories in her head, imagining conversations she had never seen, reading between lines she hoped weren't there, feeling the uneasy pull of suspicion tighten around her like a quiet storm. She remembered the laughter from the night before, the way the movie had filled the room with warmth, and now she saw it in a different light. Subtle glances, quiet distractions, small hesitations that she had ignored before, but now seemed heavy with meaning, and a wave of sadness washed over her. A sense that the simple, safe life she had trusted might be more fragile than she had ever imagined. Even Jake seemed quieter than usual, and Emily noticed the way he fidgeted with his backpack strap, the small questions he asked that seemed innocent but carried weight beyond his years, and she felt an ache in her heart, torn between wanting to protect him from grown-up problems and needing to know the truth for herself. That afternoon, she watched Mark answer a few work calls, his tone professional but distant, and Emily caught herself analyzing every pause, every small gesture, every word, searching for signs of what he wasn't saying, trying to prepare herself for whatever truth might be waiting just below the surface. She thought about the friendship Mark had with Lisa, how it might be completely innocent, how she could be overreacting, and yet the instinctive knot of worry refused to loosen, whispering that some hidden truth was pressing close to the edges of their everyday life, ready to emerge in ways that could change everything she thought she knew. That evening, as they gathered again for a simple dinner, Emily noticed Mark's distracted smile, the way his eyes sometimes darted to his phone, the way he hesitated before answering questions. And though she tried to laugh at Jake's jokes, the tension in her chest had grown, a quiet, pulsing worry that made every ordinary moment feel like it carried hidden meaning. Jake, sensing his mother's tension, whispered again, almost in a shy but insistent voice, "Mom, I think Dad is hiding something." And Emily felt a chill run down her spine, the words confirming the gnawing suspicion that had been building since the night before. She realized that tonight might be the night the truth came out, that the quiet unease, the subtle tension, the small signs she had tried to ignore would no longer stay hidden, and her heart pounded with a mixture of fear, anticipation, and sorrow. She watched Mark clean the dishes, listening to the quiet clink of plates and the low hum of the refrigerator, and she could feel every small sound magnified by the tension in the room, her mind racing with questions, doubts, and the growing certainty that her life might be on the brink of change. After dinner, when Jake went to his room to finish homework, Emily finally allowed herself a moment to breathe and think, replaying the breakfast conversation, the questions he had asked, and the small moments of distraction she had noticed in Mark's behavior. She felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her, the fear of betrayal mingled with love for the man she had chosen to spend her life with, and the thought that someone she trusted might be hiding a secret made her heart ache with longing for the simple, honest life she had always wanted. That night, Emily lay in bed beside Mark, listening to his steady breathing, the familiar sound that usually brought comfort, and instead felt a storm of questions and emotions swirling inside her, each one more pressing than the last. And she knew that soon she would have to confront the truth, face the possibility of heartbreak, and decide how to move forward for herself and for Jake. The day had started with simple routines, laughter, and comfort, and now it ended with shadows of doubt and a gnawing need to uncover the reality hidden beneath the ordinary, leaving Emily suspended in a state of anticipation, her mind racing toward a moment she could feel approaching, the moment when the quiet tension of the last 24 hours would finally demand to be faced, and nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The next morning, Emily felt the weight of yesterday pressing on her chest, a quiet tension that made every breath feel heavier, and she knew she could no longer ignore the signs, the small doubts, or the questions that Jake had innocently asked, and she decided it was time to confront Mark, to face whatever truth he had been hiding before it festered into something even more painful. And as she approached him in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the blinds, she felt a mixture of fear, anger, and the lingering love that had always anchored her, the kind of love that made confronting someone you trust feel unbearable yet necessary. Mark looked up from his cup of coffee, and for the first time that morning, Emily noticed the hesitation in his eyes, the way his hand trembled slightly as he set the mug down, and she felt a pang in her heart, knowing instinctively that whatever she was about to uncover, the quiet unease she had sensed for days, was about to become undeniable reality. "Mark, I need to ask you something," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. And he met her gaze, an unreadable expression crossing his face, the tension between them thick, almost tangible, as the hum of the refrigerator filled the brief silence, a mundane sound that now seemed heavy with anticipation. Before he could respond, Jake appeared in the doorway, clutching a small, crumpled note in his hands, his eyes wide and serious, and Emily felt her heart drop instantly, the sense of dread she had tried to hold back flooding through her like icy water. "Mom." "Dad, I found this in your bag," Jake said, his voice shaking slightly, and Emily's mind raced as she reached for the paper, unfolding it with trembling fingers, every word a knife twisting in her chest, every line revealing intimacy, secrecy, and a closeness that should never have existed outside of her marriage. She looked up at Mark, whose face had gone pale, the warmth of his usual smile gone, replaced by an honesty so raw it hurt her more than any lies ever could. I never meant for you to find out like this," he said, his voice low, shaking, carrying the weight of regret and fear, and Emily felt tears rise in her eyes, the betrayal she had subconsciously suspected now glaringly obvious, a wound that opened wider with every heartbeat. Jake stood silently, caught between curiosity, fear, and loyalty, unsure whether to retreat or stay and witness the moment, and Emily reached out to pull him close, her heart aching for the child who now had to see the fragile truth behind the life they had taken for granted as safe and unshakable. Mark explained hesitantly, each word heavy with apology and shame, trying to assure Emily that nothing physical had happened, that it had only been emotional, messages that crossed boundaries, a closeness that should have been reserved for their marriage. And Emily listened, her mind spinning, heart breaking, yet holding on to the love she still felt for the man beside her, the man she had trusted with her life. Questions tumbled through her mind, spinning faster than she could answer them, doubts colliding with memories, and she realized how easy it was to misread moments, to ignore warning signs, to lull herself into comfort when reality had been quietly shifting beneath her feet. The room felt impossibly small, the walls pressing in as the weight of truth filled the space, every glance, every gesture, every unspoken apology adding to the tension that made it hard to breathe, and Emily felt herself teetering on the edge of heartbreak, love, and the need to understand how their life had reached this point without her noticing. She asked him why, how, when, and the answers came slowly, haltingly, painfully honest, each one a mix of confusion, temptation, and regret. And Emily realized that love could be fragile in ways she had never imagined, that trust could be strained by something as invisible, yet destructive as emotional attachment outside the marriage, and that even the strongest bonds could be tested in silence. Jake watched quietly, sensing the fragility of the moment, his small hands fidgeting, his eyes darting between his parents as though trying to piece together an understanding that was far too complex for his age, yet instinctively knowing that the bond of family was shifting under his very eyes. Emily felt anger, heartbreak, and sorrow collide within her, a storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm, and yet she clung to the pieces of love that remained. The memories of laughter, of warmth, of ordinary nights, just like the one that had preceded this revelation, trying to find a way to process what had happened without losing everything she had built with Mark. She realized that forgiveness, if it came at all, would not be simple, that trust would need to be rebuilt painstakingly, and that the love she still felt was now tangled with pain, fear, and the knowledge that life had changed in ways she could not yet fully understand. The day stretched on, each moment heavy with silence and unspoken questions, the house filled with the quiet hum of tension, and Emily could feel the fragile thread of their family life trembling, the ordinary routines now tainted with suspicion and heartbreak, yet still carrying the hope that hearts could mend if approached with honesty, courage, and care. She watched Mark try to reach for her hand, the familiar gesture now awkward, tinged with fear, and she felt the longing to believe in him battling with the sting of betrayal, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with conversations, tears, and the slow process of rebuilding what had been shaken to its core. By evening, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the kitchen, and Emily sat at the table, Jake quietly drawing nearby, Mark standing awkwardly as he tried to find words to ease the hurt, and the silence was thick, pregnant with the tension of truths revealed and futures uncertain. Every small sound, the clink of dishes, Jake's pencil scratching paper, the ticking of the clock, felt amplified, reminders that life had shifted irreversibly, and Emily's mind raced with what-ifs, with plans, with fears of heartbreak and the possibility of healing, knowing that this night marked a turning point, that the quiet moments before the revelation had been the last fragments of innocence in their family's story, and that from now on, every choice, every conversation, every glance would carry the weight of truth, regret, and the fragile hope of reconciliation. She realized that love was more complex than simple trust, that mistakes could hurt deeply yet also teach, and that facing the truth, as painful as it was, might be the only way to rediscover the possibility of connection, forgiveness, and the resilience of a family trying to navigate the fragile threads of intimacy and honesty. And as night fell, Emily sat silently, feeling the tears on her cheeks, the warmth of Jake's small presence beside her, the hesitant hope in Mark's eyes, knowing that the story of their lives had changed, that the simple comfort of ordinary moments had been replaced by a storm of emotion, yet holding on to the fragile belief that hearts could heal, that trust could slowly be rebuilt, and that even after betrayal, love could find a way to survive if nurtured with patience, courage, and honesty. Days passed after the revelation, each one heavy with quiet tension and unspoken emotions, and Emily found herself walking through the house with a strange mixture of sorrow, love, and cautious hope, noticing small details she had never truly seen before. The way sunlight caught on Mark's hair, the soft sound of Jake's laughter from his room, the faint hum of the refrigerator that once felt ordinary but now reminded her of the fragility of life, and she realized that every corner of their home carried memories, love, and moments that could not simply be erased by a betrayal, no matter how painful. Yet the wound in her heart pulsed with every glance at Mark, who moved around her carefully, almost apologetically, as if each action could either heal or hurt, and she knew that the process of rebuilding trust would be long, demanding honesty, patience, and courage from both of them. Mark tried to speak, to explain further, his words tentative but sincere, acknowledging his mistakes without making excuses. And Emily listened, her heart torn between the anger that flared quickly and the deep, lingering love that refused to leave her side, and she realized that forgiveness was not about erasing the past, but about choosing to face it, to understand it, and to decide whether their hearts could find a way forward together. Jake, perceptive beyond his years, noticed the tension, but also the small gestures of care. Mark leaving a favorite snack on the counter, Emily pausing to check on him with a soft smile, tiny touches and glances that carried the weight of rebuilding bonds, and slowly, the household began to breathe differently, the heaviness gradually giving way to tentative comfort, small laughs, and the cautious warmth of hope. Emily reflected on love and family, realizing that life's simplest joys, The quiet breakfast, the laughter at a joke, a hand held across a table were worth protecting, worth fighting for, even when the heart had been hurt, and she began to understand that healing was not instant, but built from moments of honesty, shared vulnerability, and the determination to reconnect with the people she loved most. Conversations between Emily and Mark grew longer and deeper, no longer about small routines or chores, but about feelings, fears, regrets, and the hopes they still held for their marriage. And with every word, every tear shed, every apology spoken and accepted, the invisible thread of trust began to stretch slowly back into place, fragile but undeniable, a reminder that love could survive even when shaken to its core. They started to create new routines, intentionally spending time together, not out of obligation, but out of desire to reconnect, with Emily initiating small walks in the neighborhood, Mark suggesting movies or games that had once been part of their happy life, and Jake joining in, sensing the shift, feeling the quiet relief that the tension had loosened even slightly, the warmth returning in small doses, careful and delicate, but real. Emily noticed that she could smile at Mark again without pain, that conversations no longer felt like trials, and that the simple act of sharing a meal carried meaning beyond the food itself. It was about connection, reassurance, and rebuilding the sense of safety she had feared lost forever. Mark, for his part, moved with intentional care, leaving his phone aside more often, engaging fully in family moments, and showing through small actions the sincerity of his regret and the depth of his love. And Emily felt the tension in her chest ease incrementally, though she knew that the past could not be erased, and that vigilance and honesty would always be part of their journey forward. Nights began to feel lighter, the glow of the lamps softer, the quiet hum of the house no longer oppressive but comforting, and Emily realized that even though the revelation had shaken her to her core, it had also opened the door to a deeper understanding, a more mature love that acknowledged human mistakes but refused to surrender to them, choosing instead to grow and adapt, to find connection where there had once been only distance. She reflected on Jake, who now seemed calmer, more confident that his family could withstand challenges, and she realized that children often feel more than we give them credit for, absorbing tension, noticing silences, and finding reassurance in small gestures of consistency, and that by confronting the truth and taking steps to rebuild trust, they were teaching him lessons about resilience, honesty, and the enduring power of love. Emily felt a quiet pride in the effort, in the way Mark responded with humility, in the way Jake's laughter returned to fill the rooms with light, and she began to understand that hearts could heal if tended carefully, that love could survive mistakes, that families could endure storms and emerge stronger if they faced reality openly and with courage, and that even heartbreak carried the seeds of renewal. The days turned into weeks, each moment a small step toward emotional recovery, and Emily began to feel a fragile peace settling in her heart, the kind of peace that is hard-won, built from tears, apologies, conversations, and small gestures of love. A reminder that even after betrayal, life could regain warmth and meaning if nurtured with care. One evening, as they gathered again for a movie night, a quiet tradition they had almost abandoned, Emily sat between Mark and Jake on the couch, feeling the soft glow of the lamp on their faces, the buttery scent of popcorn in the air, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to smile without hesitation, to enjoy the simple comfort of presence, realizing that the storm had passed enough to let the sun through, that hearts could recover, that laughter could return, and that love, fragile but resilient, could survive the hardest truths if met with patience, honesty, and courage. She glanced at Mark, who looked back at her with tentative warmth, and then at Jake, whose small hand reached for hers, and Emily felt the gentle, steady pulse of hope. A reminder that families endure, that love endures, and that even when the past is painful and the truth is hard, the future could still hold tenderness, connection, and the quiet beauty of hearts slowly mending, one honest moment at a time, knowing that the story of their lives had changed, but that the new chapter, though born from pain, carried the promise of understanding, resilience, and the enduring power of love.